everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be talking about an essential thriller writing technique called the plot behind the plot. I have to give a tiny bit of credit to the author James N. Frey, who wrote a craft book on writing thrillers that I honestly didn't like very much, except this was one of my favorite things that he said in it, and I thought that is a really good thing to explore more in depth in a video for people who have been asking me for thriller writing resources. I definitely do this technique, and it's one that can help you in either pre-writing or with revision depending on your writing process and style. Now, all sorts of books are going to have a plot behind the plot, but in thrillers / mysteries, anything where there's stuff going on, there's suspense, there's a secret, and you have a main character who has to uncover it, and thus you have an antagonist who is doing dastardly deeds, you are going to have essentially two parallel plots that you as the author have to know and keep track of, even though only one of them is going to be on the page and part of the actual book, like the thing that the reader reads. And that is the main distinction. One is what I'm going to call your surface plot. This is your plot, your literal book. It's the main character and the things that happen and the steps that they take and the things that they learn about the thing that all comes to a dazzling conclusion in the end. Your surface plot is what you are writing. But the plot behind the plot, or you can call it the foundational plot, is all of the stuff happening in the background of your story from your antagonist's point of view, or multiple antagonists. It's all of the things that you as the author need to know are going on in the background so that on the surface you can have your character discovering things, knowing things, thinking they know things, etc., and have it all unfold in a thoughtful and logical process. This is all about sleight of hand, which is what writing a book like this is about. It's what makes them so hard because you're essentially pulling off a magic trick. And the sleight of hand will not work if you don't have a firm grasp on the plot behind the plot, because then you're just kind of throwing things out there randomly. Often there will be kind of logical leaps that will happen. You might have continuity problems. And that's the thing. I mentioned you can either use this as a pre-writing tool, so this is for you outliners out there, but you can also use this as a revision tool. So if you haven't done this and you have a book and you feel like things aren't quite hanging together, no fear, you can use this method to essentially save your book. So the way to think about the foundational plot is that, first of all, it's going to start way before the main action of your book. You're going to have to think about some deep backstory. So not only know who your antagonist or antagonists, because I'm going to talk about aspects of your foundational plot that are aside from your main villain, you have to know where they're from, what they want, the steps they are taking to get that thing, and then of course it'll align in your ending. Like it's almost like you're lining up two, graphs on top of each other, and they'll kind of line up toward the end. But your foundational plot, your plot behind the plot, is going to start way before, so it's going to be longer, a little bit more involved. I like to think of them as a series of hidden scenes or missing scenes. If you're from the kind of the fan fiction world, the fandom world, we used to do these all the time. Like we would do like missing scene fics, where you're imagining what was going on in the background of something, what someone was thinking, or about events that happened before it was on the page. It's the same creative exercise. Essentially, at any given moment in your actual plot, your surface plot, which you're writing, while you have your main character navigating things and you have things happening, you should always know in the back of your mind what's actually going on. And then the magic trick is not giving away your hand. Anytime you have your main character doing something or thinking something, you should know exactly what your antagonist of the whole book, or in that particular scene, whoever it is who's getting in the way of your main character, trying to misdirect them, trying to mislead them, you should know exactly what they're thinking and exactly what they're doing. This is also just generally going to help you with writing much better character arcs for antagonist characters, especially if you're doing anything like a sociopath. I've talked in some videos about how I love sociopath reveals, but not when they come out of nowhere. And when you've done good foundational plot behind the plot work, it shouldn't come out of nowhere, because you know exactly what that character is thinking and doing at any given point, and you will have written them with character consistency and logical consistency. Essentially, your plot behind the plot is your internal ultimate story logic. It is in many ways your story Bible. What I recommend you do, and so this can be before as an outlining tool, or you can do this as a helpful revision tool. Create 2 parallel plot lines. The actual one for your book. Beat out everything major that happens in your book, all of the major moments. It could be scene by scene, it could be chapter by chapter. Usually scene by scene is going to be the most useful. And then I want you to do the exact same thing for the plot behind the plot with some extra backstory at the top, because as I mentioned, you're going to start a little bit later. And it's basically a compare and contrast. You should have 2 plot threads, 2 plot trees that you can put next to each other, and you can go back and forth between them to make sure that what you have on the page is tracking with your internal story logic. You can use this to spot inconsistencies, to fix plot holes, to come up with brand new, better red herrings, to deepen your red herrings, to find good places for little twists and reversals and sleights of hand. So you're doing this for your main antagonist thread, but I also highly recommend doing this for any kind of mini threads, plots of side antagonists, foils, and essentially the people who perpetrate your red herrings. It's always good to know in a scene what secret a character is keeping from your main character and thus from the reader. I've definitely done this with side characters where I had a side character who wasn't like the main bad guy, but definitely had a secret. And I went back, because I did do this in revision, and I looked at every single scene. I looked for ways that that character could act and for ways that my main character could misinterpret the things that that character was doing, which generally is a very good tool to use for that sleight of hand in your surface plot. You want to think about what's really happening, but then how your main character can see and misinterpret things so that thus the reader also makes the wrong assumptions. It is all like a dance, a magic trick. None of it's easy, but when you take your plot kind of beat by beat, scene by scene, or act by act, breaking it down into more manageable pieces with everything kind of mapped out, it becomes less overwhelming, and you can definitely kind of take it piece by piece and construct a masterpiece of a thriller. So that is the plot behind the plot thriller writing technique. Let me know down below in the comments any questions that you have about this. Do you use this method? Honestly, you might be using this method and not even know it. I typically don't fully write an outline, as some of you probably know, but in my mind, I always have the plot behind the plot there as I am writing. So some of this can be brainstorming ahead of time. I recommend writing it all out just because I know for many writers looking for actionable steps, that is the most useful advice. But don't worry if you're hearing this and you're like, you're gonna make me write an outline. If you can keep it all in your head, you're totally fine. The important thing is knowing what the plot behind the plot is. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will make more videos about writing thrillers. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.